Welcome to the Walleye Files. Brandon and Jake here. We got our good buddy Dan Harper here out in Sheffield Lake, Ohio. If you don't know where that is, it's close to Lake Erie, about as close as.
Very close.
Daniel, how you doing, brother?
Good. How about you, gentlemen?
Doing well, buddy. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Fantastic.
What have you been up to, Dan?
Well, just getting ready for the season. A lot of tackle prep. Got stuff everywhere, as you can probably kind of see.
We've been to your house. We know how the tackle storage is around there.
Yeah, it gets a little interesting, but yeah, just get ready for trying to work and do my thing.
All right, Dan, for those that don't know you, let's talk about leading yourself into the season, who you are, where you're from, and your tournament experience.
Yeah, so Dan Harper, live on the west side of Cleveland, grew up here my whole life. Started fishing when I was a kid. My dad was a charter captain out in the Western Basin. So hair jigging, casting harnesses, ran charters for perch back in the day when you could just fill coolers. And it was an awesome way to grow up. From there, just screwed that up. But yeah, now just working. I'm being an ER nurse for 10 years for the Cleveland Clinic. Do that. Outside of that, I love to go to the gym. I play music with Brandon on the road. After cold cocktails, usually. That's a good way to unwind. Spend time with friends and just fish.
Yeah, that's what you brought up, the play music with Brandon. That was always so much fun. You'd get off the water at the end of the day, just so tired. You can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's nice to have something. I mean, I'm sure all guys have something that they do to unwind, but it kind of just nice to sit around a campfire or whatever, have a couple drinks, talk about the day, play some music, unwind, and just relax. It's such a grind to get out there and travel and do this stuff that we do. You got to have something to kind of break it down a little bit and just kind of help everybody refocus, re-energize. Not also, and just like remember like why you're there, like with great friends, and just kind of spend some time talking with each other.
Yeah, being able to play the guitar on the road with you and just have a few drinks and sing a little bit and just melt that stress away from pre-fishing. And because it does get a bit stressful, at least for me. We have a lot of money invested and a lot of time invested in this stuff. And at the end of the day, you expect yourself to produce. I think we all have a high confidence level going into these tournaments where you feel like you should cash a check or do well. You have goals, and that brings some stress in with it. So yeah, at the end of the day, sit down, have a cold drink, and play some guitar, and not have to worry about anything else for that half hour, 4 hours, whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly.
So down in Sheffield, I know right before we had started this, you were talking about Lake Erie getting ice. So how's the ice conditions down there? Are you going to get out, for one? And two, are we going to see any big pictures of walleyes through the ice from you?
It sounds like we're going to get the right deal. The Western Basin was locked in mostly the other day. I think the Canadian Coast Guard still cutting paths on the north side of Pelee for the freighters to get through. I looked out last night when I got home from work, and there was still like 3 or 4 freighters way offshore. So I think they're still kind of cutting that ice, letting those freighters run. Hopefully that stops, because that helps to lock in that north side. With the temperatures we have coming this week, it looks like we might get a shot to really just kind of lock it in and let it build. That's the biggest thing out there. I have only been out there a few times, but it's a little sketchy. So to know that it's locked in, let it build, there's tons of current, tons of moving water. So hopefully that all kind of happens with these low temperatures we have coming up this week. And we get out there and go, get a shot to go do it, because it is so much fun. It is dumb. It is. I know you guys ice fish a lot more than I do, but just go out there and looking at your scope, and you just feel like there's 30 of them down there, and they're all
and you guys are catching walleyes like we're catching crappies around here, and they're not small,
It's definitely different. So hopefully we get it and it works out the next few weeks. Yeah,
I've done it a few times, and that's back before live scope. I feel like having that scope right now might be the coolest thing in the world if you're jigging big walleyes on Lake Erie.
And it's like the last time I got to get out there, so that would have been 21. We had a really good ice, and we had like 2.5 days where we got to go out, and we absolutely smoked up. And we were just, back then, my buddy and I were just using Vexlars, and like you'd start jigging up, and then like the whole thing is just fish. Like you don't even know what you're fishing for anymore. You're just pulling away from like 30 or 40 walleyes. And it's just wild. Yeah, it's wild. Like my first walleye to the ice was a 31 incher.
That's terrible.
I don't know
You
where else
guys
you go.
out on Erie have it so rough.
I don't know where else you go do that at. Like, hopefully we get that shot. Yeah, I know I've got all you guys are talking. We got a few other friends that want to come down and do it. So hopefully it all kind of shakes out.
Oh, that'd be a blast.
Yeah, I think it might have to happen if you get the right conditions. I think Jake and I are gonna take a 2-day hiatus and go catch them.
It's
Yeah,
just,
I think you're right.
Brandon, you've been down here. You've seen it. It's just dumb.
Yeah, it's wild. You fish for 2 hours, you get 30, 40 walleyes, and you just look around like, how is this even possible?
It's not. It doesn't even look right. Like, and you guys, Jake, when you came down this fall, like you saw the fish on the scope. You're like, there's no way those are all walleyes. They're all walleyes.
Well, Dan, do you remember that we were fishing for a couple days and we had this school come moving through and we were fishing pretty deep. Well, deep for a Minnesota boy, but we were fishing probably 50, 60 feet of water and we had a school come through. That was maybe 2-3 feet under the water.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Dan was with us and he's like, I'm going to cast at that. I don't know what that is. After we've been watching, 24 to 30 inch walleyes move through the screen all day. And these looked a lot smaller and we were thinking, oh, maybe school of shad or something. Here it's a school of 18-inch walleyes. What?
It's just dumb.
That lake is just something special.
Dude. It's walleye heaven. You know that.
I know.
It was when you guys were here for that trip, it was so much fun because just sitting in the front of the boat, listening to you in the back of the boat, just like the couple kids in the candy store, like, there's no way those are walleyes. Oh my God, there's walleyes. Oh my God. And there's this flying everywhere. I'm just like looking back. I was even when you guys were just having like the time of your life back there. It was awesome. So yeah.
It was so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have both been here, so yeah, you come down to this fishery, it's dumb.
All right, so 2025 National Walleye Tour is coming up soon. You're obviously fishing it. Talk to us about your approach going into this season. How you prepare yourself, your mental, your physical approach, and then what's your favorite stop going into this season?
Approach would just be, I've been to some of the bodies of water, like the fourth events, obviously here on Lake Erie. We've been to Alpena. I haven't been to Sharp, but I've been on that system. So just a lot of homework trying to understand what those fisheries are doing at that time of year. And then also kind of what type of tactics I can expect to maybe practice with or employ. And then from there, I work backwards to what do I need to execute that? Do I need to get some crankbaits? Do I got to get some live bait rigs? I need more jigs, this and that. What type of line am I going to be throwing? Just trying to build up the inventory. And with that, one of the biggest things, and you guys both fish and know this, like when you get done with the whole year that we just got done with, it's organization. So getting all your baits back in the right boxes. What actually do you have? What actually do you need? I hate spending $100 on crankbaits and then finding a box with $200 in crankbaits that I didn't even know I had because nothing was organized correctly. So just trying to get that all dialed in, map study, talking with friends, trying to figure out, all those things that, the logistics of just getting there and what do we have to do with the trailers, the trucks, the boats, all those kinds of things just to work on. Event that I'm really looking forward to is, and I know probably a lot of guys aren't, is lacrosse. I super have to fish the Mississippi River again. I had an absolute riot this year at Red Wing. I got to fish Prairie du Chien a couple years ago, and I really love the river. It's super challenging. It's a lot of fun when you start to figure out a few things, and they're just awesome fish. So I'm super excited to get down to lacrosse.
It's really funny that you say that, a Lake Erie guy looking forward to fishing rivers.
It's it's funny. I know like a lot of guys here don't like to do it. I spent a lot of time over the last 20 years steelhead fishing and smallmouth fishing in our rivers. I enjoy fishing rivers. I love trout fishing. Trout fishing is my other passion. And it's just something special about the moving water. I feel like moving water, it's a different connection to the system. And like when we were at Red Wing last year, and you're in those areas where you're tied up to shore, whatever you're doing. There's the trees, there's the birds, there's the moving water. It's always changing. And I really feel like if you can figure out those fish, where they're going with the water levels, ups and downs, color, clarity, temperature, I think it's always an ever-changing environment, which I think is awesome to try to challenge yourself to be a better fisherman. So those places are super awesome to go to. I mean, you got a shot at those big fish too, right? And you guys both hook big walleyes on the Mississippi. You don't know what you have until it comes up either. So it's like a rod's loaded up and then just this giant head comes up. I mean, it's a special place. So I'm excited to get down there.
Yeah, this year's Mississippi River event out of Red Wing was by far the most fun event of the year. You and I have talked about it at length, and there really is such a different dynamic compared to fishing a Great Lake. And there's always current, right? But walking into a Mississippi River event, there's just 3 times the amount of current, little nooks and crannies that can really change whether you're catching fish or not. It'll change the current. Those fish will sit in a certain place for a certain reason. So yeah, that's definitely, when I asked, I kind of expected that answer. I was pretty sure of it.
And it's fun too, because like if you come to Lake Erie, like, okay, you control crankbaits, you can pitch plastics, you can do whatever you want to do, cast harnesses, those things, will always catch a fish. And I'm sure there's things at the Mississippi that will always catch you a fish too. But there's a lot of nuances and little adjustments. And when you make those adjustments, you go from not catching to boating to boating a bunch of, giant fish, right? So there's those moments when you realize a certain thing and you do it and you're like, oh my God, we just figured out something, or this worked. I can't believe this worked. But the nuances I find on the river can make a lot of difference. And it's awesome to always, and like, it's always changing, right? So to be able to just stay on your toes and have these different techniques in your head, but be adaptable to different situations. I mean, you might wake up one day and this and that, it's doing this, or throughout a course of a day, and learning the little things of how that river works. Like a big trick that I learned was all the boats racing down, right? We were all going down the chute. We were all going down the side channel. Okay, what do all those boat wakes do to the shoreline? They wash the mud in. Well, that takes an hour to clear. So you might be on a spot where you got really great fish and it might not bite because it's trash for an hour, but it's going to clear. So you have to, like, there's just so many different cool things you can learn and figure out. And those fish are so sweet because you catch them in areas where you're like, there's no way there's a big walleye in there. And they're in there.
Yeah. 2.5 feet of water pulling rigs, and you're like, there's no way we're going 4 miles an hour and you're catching fish after fish.
And they're just loading up the rod. You're just like, I can't believe this is dumb. Just waving.
So I got a question for you, Dan.
Yeah, go ahead.
You had mentioned sharp.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first tournament of the NWT season, correct?
Yes, sir.
So what are you expecting that tournament to look like? Are you expecting 20 to 30 pounds? Like, what's your expectations there, and how are guys going to be catching them?
I have never been to Sharp, but I've been to Case a few times. I love the Missouri River, especially in the spring and early summer. For me, on that system, it could be a mud pit. It could be great. Its fish is more like a river. There's a lot of current, so I'm anticipating more a river style fishery, especially as practice is going on. I think if a guy can get, looking back at the history on that system, I think if a guy can get to 10 pounds, 12 pounds, you're going to be looking really good. I think if you can get to 8 to 10 pounds, you're going to get out of there with some points and be happy. I think it's going to fish like a river. What it does this winter and through the spring, if they get a ton of snow and it's a big blowout and it's a trash pit, it could be a grind for sure, but it could also be low and clear. I've never been up to that part of that's the lake. I haven't fished on the Missouri, so it'll be a challenging, for sure. But I think basic Missouri River tactics are going to work, especially springtime stuff, hair jigs, cranks, jigs and crawlers, jigs and plastics, jigs and minnows, some live bait rig stuff. You might have to slow it down. So that's one that's I've been working on trying to develop some stuff to get better at, because I don't get to fish a lot of those systems. I live in Cleveland, so I don't live on the Missouri, and that's 18 hours away. I don't have a lot of experience out there. So just trying to think how that fishery is going to go. Hopefully it's not a super big mud pit. I know Dewey lives there, and those guys are probably super jazzed to have one in their backyard. But it should be a lot of fun. I think if you're 12 pounds, you're going to be really happy. I think if you're 8 to 10 pounds, you're going to be feeling pretty good and getting out of there with some points.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will catch fish. It's a pretty target-rich environment. I think there's a lot of fish there. I just think it's going to be a matter of catching it over, right? And then obviously catching those 19
Yeah, I think that when the Masters was there with their World Walleye Championships a couple years ago, I think there was the one guy that weighed 17 pounds the one day, but he had a unicorn 9-pounder. but everything else was in that, like, if you can get in that like 12, you're going to be very happy. For me, my goal is to get to 10. If I come out of there with 9 a day, I think you'll still be pretty happy. And
All
the
right, Dan, it's only awkward if you make it awkward, Dan. So you personally, Dan, who's your biggest inspiration for being a tournament angler, for doing what you do?
Yeah, so you sent me that question and I thought about it for about a half hour, and I can't point to one guy. I think the beauty
No
of
point to one. Give me a couple.
Yeah, so I think doing what we do, putting yourself out there, getting on the road and meeting all these different people that you get to meet, you really truly meet a lot of amazing people. And I've got friends here that the relationships have gotten better. And then I've been blessed to meet people like you. And I've got friends in Minnesota, the Dakotas, Wisconsin, and I've been blessed to get to travel with a lot of guys and just randomly meet people, and which develop into, like, I was your co-angler, Brandon, and like
You sure were.
You weren't happy that you two, you stuck it out and we fished it out, and then a year later I'm in your wedding. So
that's one of my favorite stories, by the way.
I mean, just like met this guy, and then 5 hours later on the back of the boat, just air guitaring, AC/DC and having a riot. To point to one person, I can't. Craig Lewis here at the shop's been super. I've been super blessed with the relationship. You guys are great friends. I got to travel with Mark Kortz for a couple years. Greg Eli, all these different guys have been super, super inspirational, and have definitely given me a lot of pointers and help. And just they help guide you down the journey. I'm older, but I got into the sport later in life, so I don't have a lot of these experiences that some guys that got into it in the early mid-20s have. So I just try to pick one person is too much. I cherish all the relationships that I've got to make, and that's like one of the biggest things that I can say to guys when they want to sign up as a co-angler is the fishing's awesome, right? You get to go fish with pros, and you get to go ride their rigs, and you get to bring nothing, and you can show up and you get to learn a new body of water. But it's about the relationships and the people that you meet. I think that's a super undervalued aspect to the sport, especially having those co-anglers versus other series that don't do co-anglers. With the Walleye Tour, I think that's one really cool thing that the tour does is bring those random co's in, and you end up just meeting amazing people. So yeah, I've been super blessed to have amazing friends, fishing partners,
So you'd mentioned Greg Eli and Mark Kortz. Those guys in particular they're well known in the industry. Can you point to something that those two have taught you about, like, what baits to throw and when? Can you talk about something where, on pool 4, if the water is doing this, or, something like that?
Yeah, I got to fish. So I met Greg Eli. He was my draw as my first year as a co-angler at Sturgeon Bay. And I had no idea. We fished the first event at Case, and I pulled Cavias and another local kid out there, Nick Allen, great guys. And then I went to Sturgeon Bay, and I just wanted to just learn new bodies of water. And I was super jazzed to be up there that time of year, Green Bay, in May, out of Sturgeon Bay. And we went up and we did rip and wraps, and learning that how, I never got to rip wrap fish like that. And we went out and we stroked some really nice fish. So that was awesome. So Greg's taught me a lot, about being flexible. There might be things that he's not super awesome on, but he's a good enough angler to understand, all right, I don't know how to do this, but I'm gonna spend some time, figure it out, and he's open to thinking about it, thinking it clearly and thinking it through to execute that. Somebody like Mark Kortz, he's been there, done all of it. He's a well-accomplished angler. He doesn't, need me to jazz him up any more than he already is awesome. Traveling with Kortzy, especially the year that him and I traveled with Dino and Cody and those guys, like watching his execution in practice and the way that they break down the water was super awesome. But one of the biggest things that I learned from Kortzy was just his tackle prep and his attention to detail. We would be rewinding rods all the time. We would be changing leaders. We would be doing this, and he would, like, today we're going to do this, this, and this. And it was the way that he would approach his practice and his thought process on the things that he wanted to fish, how he wanted to fish them, different times of day. there's not one specific thing that I learned from him that was, I can point to that'd be like, oh my God, I mean, he taught me so much, but just his general approach to how, and travel with those guys too, like a big thing that I think that you learn, and you guys have both spent time, alongside along those accomplished anglers, is their approach on the water, their practice and their execution in tournaments and the decisions they make are all super huge, parts of what we do. But half of what they do and half of what that makes them great is their execution off the water, how they handle their business meetings, how they deal with sponsors, how they talk to fans, how they present themselves in an environment where they know they're the guy. And those are a lot of things that you can't learn by just being a random guy, right? You have to listen to a lot of business calls, riding in the truck with Courtsy from Berkeley and everybody else. And you learn how to be a professional. And those guys have taught me a lot about that whole other side of the aspect of the sport, about how to act, carry yourself, represent yourself. Those are invaluable lessons.
So Dan, what is one thing you need to work on? What's something you need to be better at then?
Oh my God, stupid.
I mean, other than all of it,
There's
other
so
than all
much.
of it, right?
There's so much.
We're never going to be perfect, and we're always striving to be perfect. But if there's one thing that you yourself, you look at and you go, I need to be better at this.
Yeah. So decisions are huge decision making. I made some really good decisions last year that really helped elevate my year. And I could point to a couple of them that were just like, all right, if I didn't do that, my season is totally different. I think just being open-minded, I find myself, if I'm on a bite, that I get pigeonholed into just focusing on like, all right, they're biting a jig wrap. And I don't take anything off. I never take the jig wrap off. I never think about, all right, well, if they're biting a jig wrap, what color, size, would they also bite this? And being a little bit more flexible in my mind to approach the practice or even the tournament days and adapt through the days. Just being a little bit more open-minded. I need to work on that to be like, all right, they stopped biting this. What else are they going to bite? Instead of trying to force feed them what I want to throw.
That boy.
Yeah.
So last year, just mentioned the season last year. What was your favorite stop last year? You had some really, really good finishes, made it to the championship, but there's a couple in there that you made some really good decisions and moved yourself up in the leaderboard. What was your thought process on those?
Yeah. So the year started off great. Obviously, we were on Lake Erie in April, and that was awesome. And my buddy Craig and I, we had gotten to fish those fish that we fished in that derb all winter long because we had no ice. So we were out there all winter working on the program that we were using to execute out there for that tournament. And I had sat there and with Brandon in meetings all week and been like, oh man, the wind sucks. The water sucks. We were out west and we were like this. And that one was like the third to last day. I think we just like, screw it. We're going to go east. Like, why are we abandoning everything I've been working on for 5 months and we hadn't even looked at them yet. And I was like, let's just go, whatever. We figured it out. But I went over there. I think Brandon went to the cans, comes back. And we're like, all right, like, yeah, they're there. Like, we need to go figure that out. And we went out that couple more days of practice and started to locate the schools. So the good decision there was just being like, all right, stop trying to like overthink this. Like, what have you been doing and what are you good at? And then the biggest decision or the biggest thing in that tournament was the decision to go. Right. We're sitting there in the harbor, especially day 2, river's ripping. Yeah. It's blowing whatever it was, 20, 25 out of the northwest. And we had a 50-mile run to go. And I was like, I looked at my co-guard. I was like, I don't know, like if we're going to be able to get there, but if we can, I think we can catch them pretty quick. So it took us 2 hours, 2.5 hours to get down there. And I remember I put the scope in the water. I turned around and this big puff of wind came through right in front of this little bit of rain. And I was like, oh, we're done. We're never getting home. We're screwed. Made the wrong decision. It worked out. We fished for 90 minutes and caught our fish and got out of there. So that was a super, super awesome event. Red Wing did well there. And again, it was the decision and the timing. I got to my spot, my big fish spot on day 1 and somebody was in it, kind of did some stuff, went around, ran around. I went and checked a couple of things and I left the secondary spot and I was going to go to my third spot and I come through and I was like, let's just check it. I make a left. Nobody's in it, slid in, dump a 28, and about second cast, so my conger sticks a giant, pull the boat out, slide down, and moved on. So it was those decisions were super were important this year. And I felt like 2 years ago when Brandon and I were on the tour, that was my first year as a pro. I was all over the place. I had no idea what I was doing. I was spinning out left and right. But this year I felt like I thought it through a little clear. Yeah, and it worked out for us.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, like my biggest weakness is not spinning out. I spin out well too fast, and I think you're totally right. I think making clear decisions is definitely a big part of the sport. Honestly, day 2 at Red Wing was maybe one of my favorite days fishing, this year. It was our whole team, the 4 of us, every single one of us weighed in early. We're all pulling in, and I'm looking around, and we teamed with John Kupchak. He was in first when I came in. I weighed in with an over. I caught my over while you watched me catch it. You were like 20 feet from me. You pulled up, and it was my first cast, and it was like, boom, got a big one. It was a 24 or 25 incher. And I looked at you. We may have celebrated for a half second, and you slid in there. Yeah, honestly, one of my favorite memories of the year for sure.
That was a super awesome memory because my co-linger is like, what are you doing? And I was like, just wait, just watch. And you were like, and I was like, he was like, oh my God. I was like, yep, it's our turn now. Slid in there. He's like, this is wild. I was like, you never tell anybody.
Yeah, it was.
You guys still won't tell me where you caught him, and I live right next to Pool 4.
That's why we won't tell you.
I've been sworn to secrecy, and I will ever and for always remain secret on that one.
Yeah, I already know where you guys were, though. I'm kidding.
It was impressive. Yeah, that's still definitely my favorite tournament from this year. Just the thought of, we pulled in at noon. I pulled in and weighed in at noon. John had just gotten off the stage, and I got back in my boat, and I was getting ready to put it on the trailer. You're coming in, you're waving your hands over your head, and I'm like, buddy, we've all got overs. This is crazy. Yeah. An hour later, Matt comes walking in. He's got one too. It was just a crazy, crazy day.
Yeah, it was. That was a special place, and it's like you live on Green Bay, right? I live on Lake Erie, and we fish here all the time. And we have good days, and you and I have done well up on Green Bay, and I've done well here in Lake Erie. But you go to somewhere else where you're not really familiar with, and you have those days and the experience of those days, right? That's what makes those places, to me, special. It's something that you might not get on a place where you live, like Lake Erie. I mean, I could win a tournament here, and it'd be super awesome. I would never forget it. But to have those days that we had on those places where we don't live and don't get to fish and execute was awesome.
And then rolling into the following tournament, the third tournament of the season, Green Bay.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. How did you approach your practice, knowing the time of the year, the alewives, all that stuff? How did you approach practice?
Yeah, so that was one where I've been there a few times. Brian and I fished it together. I've done well there. I've done well there with Dragon and NWT. So I knew the layout of the land a little bit. The alewives obviously were a giant caveat to that whole situation. In practice, I felt myself just trying to force feed a bite that I didn't think was there or I could execute. And I spent 2 or 3 days in areas that I would never go to. And I did it because we were just trying to figure out a way, where are some fish that aren't surrounded by alewives that we can poke off some fish. And we sat there in 2 or 3 days and we're like, man, this sucks. Like, we suck. We really suck. We can't catch anything.
That was the general conversation in the house for sure.
Yeah. It was, that was 6 days of me not catching a walleye. I was a cranky dude. I was not a happy guy.
So Big John goes north. And he calls and he's like, yeah, I got a 30. I was like, okay. And then he catches another nice one. Okay. So then I go up there the last day of practice and I had 2 casts at a 31 and a 29. I was like, okay, we can figure this out. It's really far from home. It's going to be a lot of execution and gas and time. I went up there.
Yeah, we almost had you convinced to take your kicker off the night before the tournament.
It was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were taking every single thing out of the boat.
It really was 1 o'clock in the morning.
It was.
Yeah, it
definitely was.
And that's the things, again, those little side stories on tour where you're like, you never would have, I don't know, you never thought you'd see yourself having that conversation at 1 in the morning before you launch your boat. Like, I want to, that's 200 pounds, whatever it weighs. Like, I wonder if that would give me an extra gallon. But driving all the way up there, went up there day one, made it. I drove all the way across, all the way straight there. Those Yamahas are awesome. I was super good on gas, and I had no idea if we were ever going to get there. A great story was on the north side of Chambers, cutting across, and my coder was like, "Oh man, we got to be getting close." I was like, "Do you see land ahead of you?" He was like, "No." I was like, "Dude, we're still like 55 miles away." But so then I hadn't considered it. So I plotted the course in my graph when I left, and I'm in just zoning mode, right? I'm just going, and Whaleback Shoal is there, and it's right in the middle of my course. And I'm just driving, and I see a buoy up ahead. I was like, all right, probably getting close to Whaleback. And then I look ahead, and I'm like, oh God, like those rocks come way up.
It's like 2 feet of water.
My course took me dead over the middle of the top of Whaleback Shoal. I was like,
Yeah.
we're going to be those idiots that hit a rock in the middle of Green Bay. But no, we got up there, dropped a couple fish, didn't catch one day one. I go up there again day two because what else do we got? My co-angler, he sticks a nice one. Well, sticks a 3-4 pounder, which saved my season. Brandon sticks one right next to me. Big Johnner's over here catching his fish, and it worked out really fun. That was a super awesome bite. Definitely.
Yeah, I try to explain it to people. That's the coolest interaction with fish I've ever had. Just, and I know not everybody enjoys forward-facing sonar, and that's fine. But I learned more about the mood of fish and the way they act and the way they react to certain, circumstances that day than I've ever learned in my life.
And it was like fishing in Jurassic Park. You're in 20 foot of water, super huge, tall, delicious looking grass, and just big roamers. And a lot of guys caught them up there. John was up there. Tom was up there. Those other guys were up there. But yeah, that was a super awesome place. I got out of there, and I was like, thank you, Lord, for a 4-pounder.
Yeah.
It was a fun place.
So moving on, the last stop last year before the championship was Sakakawea. I don't know. I personally, I just never had it going. I had some good stuff here and there, but never anything overly consistent. You had a really nice practice. You had some of the right deals, and then go ahead.
Yeah. So that was a fun place. I hadn't been to that place on the Missouri yet. So we stayed up at a great house up in there in Van Hook, and spent a couple of days up there playing around and caught some fish, and it was a lot of fun. I learned there how to be a better glide bait fisherman. That was the place where I figured out a couple of different jig strokes that definitely made a huge difference. So that was a lot of fun. And that was another place where I ran to my spot, and I was the only guy that fished my spot on day two. And I run up there, and I get a couple. And then I come back down where we were, whatever that was, like 25 miles away, back towards the ramp. And I'm watching you, and I think you get one. And then I'm looking at my graph, and I'm just like, man, they're just not really here. They don't look really big. They're not really here. I was like, we got 2 hours. Like, screw it. Turn around, drive the boat all the way back, away from the ramp, drive all the way back to my spot, put the trolling wheel in the water, scope over. There's a big one, 5-6 pounder. Cool, done, game over. And those are the couple of those decisions that was like drove all the way back in and had them. But those were decisions that definitely changed the course of the year for me as far as finishes go. I mean, I jumped up like 50 places, I think, in that event with those couple of fish on day two there. And that was the one thing I think this should look back that was kind of cool was I got better every day. Day one to day two, I got better every day. I was able to kind of feel out the fishery, how my bites were going, dial in my plan a little better, and just make better, clear decisions. So that was a really cool, just kind of personal victory. I didn't cash a check, but I walked out. I was like, man, I think I kind of learned. I learned something about myself and how to execute better on these events, and that was a fun place. Those
a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was fun. It was cool.
Man.
Those guys are sweet fish.
Those are some aggressive fish. When they decide to bite, they hit hard.
Yeah, you were in the boat with me that week of practice, and God, man, going in.
Yeah, it was hot.
Going to get some ice cream after mid-practice was awesome.
Yep.
Running
you and I, yeah, topping the boat out, just standing up, airing out the pits as we go, Yeah.
Running around thunderstorms, and then come back in and catch like whatever that big one was, like an 8-pounder in practice there, and it was, yeah.
Yep.
Man, that was a lot of fun. That's a sweet place.
Yeah, that fishery, Man, this last season we really made some, like, I went to a lot of really cool fisheries. That was a fantastic schedule, minus the time of the year that we were in Green Bay. Obviously, it could have been a little better, but I mean, the bodies of water that we were on were so much fun.
Yeah,
So much fun.
it was a great schedule, and yeah, being at those places at those times was awesome. It was
Yeah. I think Sakakawea honestly might have jumped up in one of my favorite bodies of water. Last year I fished the Masters on Cass, and Cass is in Minnesota, and I'd never fished it. I think maybe once when I was a kid with my dad, but that fishery jumped to the top of top of the list too. So there were some really cool fisheries last year.
Yeah, Cass is a sweet place, but yeah, the tour took us to. It was the right schedule. The timing was a little bit off, but honestly, I wasn't super mad about the Green Bay event when we were there, even with the AOY, because it challenges an angler to be a better angler. We didn't execute super awesome. John did. We both dropped fish that would have really helped, but I don't always like going to the right place at the right time. Obviously, we want to go stick giants, and that'd be super sweet, but I think it really helps to figure out who really is a good angler and can read the conditions that day and do the things and execute.
Yeah, I agree. What other tournaments are you doing this season? I know you and I are going to do the MWC on Erie coming up in April. Any other tournaments that you're in?
We got the Loot MWC in April, which should be an awesome event. I don't think I can swing it, but I really want to go fish Spring Valley again. I haven't really talked to you guys about that, but I had a riot there. It was so much fun. I don't think I'll get to go do it, but I would like to go do that one. We're going to do MWC out of Gladstone in July.
Yeah, we sure are.
See you there.
That'll be a lot of fun. And Brandon and I have been talking. I really want to go get out to a Gov Cup somewhere, like on Pack or somewhere. Just go do a Gov Cup, different type of format. I think my buddy out in Minnesota, we're gonna do the LPO on the way home from Lake Sharp, on the pool 4 there. So that'll be a lot of fun. I haven't got to fish there in that time of year.
When is that one, Dan?
I think it's like whatever. That's the day after we get. So we get done with Sharp on whatever we get done that with, like third week of April. It's that next Saturday, the next day. So I'm just gonna drive home from South Dakota, pull into Minnesota, take a nap, go fish another tournament. So that one should be fun. And honestly, like my buddy Craig and I, we get to fish a lot here. We have talked about trying to go do a bass event somewhere. So I think there's a team trail up on St. Clair. We might go try to do something like that. But yeah, I'm excited.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, Gladstone's gonna be a lot of fun. The first Loot MWC is gonna be awesome. Kind of see where it goes from there.
All right, we're approaching that 50-minute mark, so we're gonna close with this. I think we don't want to run too far, but what's one thing that you've learned that's it's made you a better angler that other people may not may overlook, that's going to make them a better angler?
Yeah, so you sent me that question too, and I thought about it for a little bit, and I feel that just being open-minded, and however you approach a body of water will help guide you to find things that you never thought you would have found. I think a lot of guys, especially around here, get pigeonholed into their mindset. I got to go troll cranks. I'm going to go troll dipsies. And that catches a lot of fish. And I can point to a couple of things. So like last year before I went to Sakakawea, whatever that was, early mid-July, the bite here is usually all offshore. Everybody's out, trolling dipsies, going 4 miles an hour, doing that whole deal. And I needed to practice just some rock stuff. So I came into my shallow piles here and we wrecked them. Like we caught, 50, 60 fish on glide baits and death jigs. And I go into the shop and I park my boat and I'm talking to Craig and he's like, "How'd you do?" I was like, "We wrecked them." "What was your biggest one?" I was like, "We had like a 9.5 pounder." Awesome. And then he's a bunch of charter captains in there and they're like, "Oh, we caught 3, we caught 2, we caught 6. And they're all out in like 60, 70 foot of water. And these guys all drove over every single fish that I caught. So I think just being open-minded to like, I wonder if they're in there. Maybe go look. You know what I mean? You don't think just because it's supposed to be this way that it has to be the way or it's going to be that way. And I think, just being on tour, you learn those things even more so. Like you find guys in areas, you're like, what are they doing in there? And then they end up winning the thing in there and you're like, there's no way they should be there, but they're totally there. So being open-minded, either in a presentation or an area, I think is something that we could all do to get better at fishing.
Awesome.
Well said. Well, thank you for your time, Dan. I sure appreciate it. And it's always fun talking to you.
Absolutely, boys. Appreciate you guys.